The manager made a risky bet. The woman at the piano changed the moment. The grand opening of the celestial veil was an hour away. Across the polished obsidian floor of the main lounge, the manager watched the final preparations with a cold, pragmatic eye. His establishment, the most ambitious entertainment complex on the neutral space station Axiom, was a masterpiece of calculated luxury. It catered to a specific clientele: weary corporate titans, alliance diplomats, and the various sophisticated life forms who valued discretion and excess in equal measure. Every detail, from the bioluminescent fungi art installations to the gravity-adjusted seating for the heavier galactic Concord species, was engineered for one purpose: profit. Yet the centerpiece felt hollow. A sleek, black performance platform stood empty under a silent cone of light. The scheduled act, a renowned Vrol sonic sculptor, had its transport diverted by a bureaucratic dispute. The manager had been offered replacements: a troupe of holographic dancers, a famed Martian mime. But these were safe, predictable. They would not generate the chatter he needed. They would not make the celestial veil legendary. His assistant, a young man with perpetually worried eyes, approached. "Sir, the alternatives are here." "The mime is quite—" "Forget the mime," the manager interrupted, his voice a low hum. He stared at the empty platform. A reckless idea, born of desperation, took root. What about the human? The assistant paled. The piano player from the cargo bay lounge? "Sir, that's a freight hauler's bar. The instrument is antiquated. The music is simple. Our guests, they expect avant-garde experiences. They expect to be surprised," the manager corrected, though he shared the doubt. Humanity was a recent, somewhat awkward addition to the broader galactic community. They were seen as clever, resilient, but culturally loud, unrefined. Their art was considered primitive emotional outbursts. Hiring a human to perform in this sanctum of high culture was not just a risk. It was a potential debacle. "It is a very large risk," the assistant whispered. "A calculated one," the manager said, making his decision. "Bring her. Tell her to play. Whatever she feels is appropriate. No restrictions." The woman arrived with little fanfare. She was of average human height, her attire simple, a dark, practical outfit suited to the station's regulated climate. She carried no instrument. She merely observed the grand piano, a real Earth-made Steinway the manager had acquired as a curiosity, now positioned on the platform. She ran a finger along its polished lid, a gesture that seemed less like inspection and more like a quiet greeting. The first guests filtered in. A Gurlian ambassador, its chitinous form glistening, settled into a reinforced booth with a soft whir of servos. A trio of elegant Lycian sisters, their skin like polished opal, whispered behind delicate fans. A corpulent Tellarite magnate sipped something purple and smoking. The air grew thick with murmured conversations in a dozen languages, the clink of exotic glassware, and a palpable sense of anticipatory judgment. The manager stood in the shadows, his heart a drum against his ribs. He had bet his reputation on an unknown variable. The woman finally sat at the piano. She adjusted the stool, opened the fallboard, and placed her hands in her lap. For a long moment, she simply sat there, looking at the keys as the audience began to shift with impatience. The Tellarite muttered something about primitive pageantry. Then she began. It was not a loud start. It was a single, clear note, followed by another, then a chord that hung in the air, rich and complex. It was a piece called Clair de Lune. The notes fell like droplets of water into a still pond, each one spreading rings of quietness through the lounge. The whispered conversations did not stop so much as they faded, the sounds being drawn into the spaces between the piano's phrases. The manager watched, stunned. This was not the boisterous human music he had expected. This was a landscape of sound. It painted pictures of a world none of them had ever seen. Soft light on quiet water, the gentle ache of memory, the fragile beauty of a solitary moment. The melody was achingly simple in its core, yet woven with harmonies that spoke of profound depth. The Gurlian ambassador had gone perfectly still, its multifaceted eyes fixed on the woman's hands. The Lycian sisters had lowered their fans, their expressions unreadable, but their attention absolute. The Tellarite had set his drink down, untouched. The piece ended with a whisper of sound that seemed to dissolve into the air. For 3 full seconds, there was utter silence. Then the woman's hands moved again. This time, it was different. The opening chords of Rhapsody in Blue cut through the stillness, a bold, sprawling declaration. It was the sound of a city, of energy, of chaotic beauty, structured into a thrilling whole. Jazz rhythms collided with classical form, a joyous, rebellious conversation between her left and right hands. It was complex, demanding, a torrent of technical prowess that left no doubt of her mastery. Yet, woven through the brilliance was that same thread of raw, communicable emotion, longing, exultation, a relentless forward drive. The music did not ask for permission. It simply was. It filled the celestial veil, not as noise, but as a physical presence. A Wenzel trader, a species known for their emotional detachment, felt an unfamiliar tightness in its thoracic cavity. It did not have a name for the feeling, but its data ports tingled with anomalous readings. The manager forgot to breathe. He was not hearing music. He was witnessing a translation. The human was translating the intangible human experience, the quiet melancholy, the frenetic ambition, the stubborn hope, into a pure, universal language of vibration and rhythm. She was not playing for them. She was playing, and in doing so, she included them all. She moved through a short, powerful piece by a composer named Scriabin, a storm of dissonance and yearning that resolved into something strangely peaceful. Then she finished with a piece of her own. It began with a slow, repeating pattern in the lower register, like the distant hum of a starship's drive. A melody emerged above it, lonely and searching, echoing the vastness outside the station's hull. It built, incorporating fragments of the previous pieces, a musical summation of the journey. It spoke of distance, of home, of the quiet courage found in the dark between stars. It was, the manager realized, the sound of humanity itself, ancient, scarred, looking up and deciding to go. The final note faded. This time, the silence was different. It was full. It was the silence of absorption, of a shared experience too large for immediate applause. The Gurlian ambassador raised a primary limb, not in applause, but in a slow, deliberate gesture of respect its species reserved for profound philosophical revelations. The Lycian sisters simply bowed their heads. The Tellarite magnate was the first to make sound a single, solid clap that was quickly swallowed by a wave of others. Not the polite patter of a satisfied audience, but a thunderous, genuine outpouring that shook the glassware on the tables. The woman at the piano stood, gave a small, humble bow, and stepped off the platform. She did not look triumphant. She looked like someone who had completed a necessary task. The manager found her near the service entrance, preparing to leave. The assistant was beside him, his face transformed by awe. That was, "Sir, the bets were settled. You won. The entire evening is changed." The manager ignored him. He looked at the human woman. "You knew," he said, his voice rough. "You knew what that would do." She met his gaze. Her eyes were calm. "I knew the music. You provided the moment. It was a good piano." "It was a risky bet," he admitted. "The best ones usually are," she said. "You wanted them to see something new." They did. They heard it. She left then, returning to the cargo bay lounge and its crowd of freight haulers. But the atmosphere in the celestial veil remained charged. Conversations were hushed, not out of boredom, but out of a need to process. Strangers of different species exchanged glances, finding a sudden, unspoken common ground. The Gurlian was deep in discussion with a human diplomat who had arrived late, using musical terms to bridge a gap in a trade negotiation. The mood was no longer one of detached appraisal, but of genuine connection. The manager walked back onto the floor, now bustling with a different energy. His risky bet had not just paid off. It had redefined the space. The woman at the piano had not simply played notes. She had changed the frequency of the entire evening. She had taken a room full of isolated beings, and for a short while made them a temporary audience, a unified whole. In doing so, she had proven a quiet, powerful truth about her kind. Humanity's art was not a primitive noise. It was a key, and tonight it had unlocked something in all of them. The moment was irrevocably changed.